This next one, I don't know what to expect from it, so I guess we'll find out.
Okay, today I want to discuss an issue that's been bothering me for a very long time, basically the entire lifespan of the channel since I got started on YouTube. And that issue is tech demo marketing in the video game space. I'll go over a bunch of different examples later.
Sorry for the early pause, but this is also something that I have always taken to heart, and I've always learned. I learned a long time ago. Tech demos are tech demos. It is not at all a representation of what the game should or will look like. It is always a representation of the technology that's being used and just kind of showcase some of the new things technology can do inside of our games. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Even the ones I remember there was a tech demo done for Final Fantasy VII Remake many years ago. It looked amazing. Obviously, the final release of the remake didn't was not representative of that. And there's been many other examples, like the Cyberpunk one. That was another good example of that. And people read way too much. Like people that are like outside of game development or outside of from a business perspective, they tend to read really deep into this, and they think, oh my god, this game looks amazing, oh it's gonna be so great, it's gonna be the best game ever. Slow your fucking roll, dude. It's literally like going to like a, I don't know, some kind of like automobile expo or whatever, and they show off some really cool concept car. Those concept cars are just that, they're just concepts. They're not real. They're not going to go into like a showroom floor or through a factory floor. They're literally just there to say, hey, we have this idea, here's what it might look like. That's it. Nothing else. That's it.
On, but for right now, the short version is this. Over the past 20 or so years, a trend has developed in the video game industry where instead of using actual gameplay to showcase a product, studios and publishers will often put together what's called a vertical slice in some cases, or a tech demo in others, which is then advertised as if it were actual gameplay, sometimes by omission or clever editing, but other times they just flat out make the claim. Here and there, you'll notice bits and pieces of qualifying language, such as all the footage was captured in engine, or things like that. But the purpose behind the practice is to make as many people as possible think that the footage they are seeing is the actual game, whether or not the game even exists at that point in time. On the one hand, I understand that advertising something which is just not complete yet probably requires a fair bit of estimation. I've witnessed the video game development process up close many times in the past, and it's abundantly clear that things change or evolve over the course of years. But on the other hand, the practice of putting something together that looks like a finished product, plays like a finished product, at least on screen in front of the audience, nobody's actually playing, and even sounds like a finished product, with voice actors impersonating real players as if what's happening is legitimate gameplay, that's where the line starts to blur between.
I will say that even during some of the like showcases for games where they start to show off showcase, or like they will show off like gameplay or whatever, and they'll have somebody on the stage with a controller, and they're playing it and it looks so cool, and it's like you're so hyped up because it looks amazing. Half of the time that is another obfuscation tactic, and it's meant to deceive, to get people to get into the game or get interested or buy the game, and it works. It is a very good and sound business tactic. Is it ethical? That's for you to decide. But it does work. So there is those cases where that does happen. Now, not all of them do that. There are some that actually do. They are really playing it. I guess a really good example is when Final Fantasy 16 was first being showed off and showcased. They did gameplay reveal, gameplay trailers, and all this stuff. One of the developers was actually playing the game and went super fucking super try hard on that boss. And I'm sure, if you remember that video, he was good at that game. That is an example of, sometimes it does showcase the actual gameplay. And the game tends to be better when your developers actually play the games that they are making. But there's also examples where they're not playing the game and it's just a false flag, or not a false flag, but it's like a curtain. But yes, there are those cases where that kind of stuff does happen.
Between advertising, marketing, and just outright lying. I'm not making the claim right now that every studio is
I don't feel like it's a lie. Okay, I'll just say that. I don't care what you have to say, but I don't think it's a lie. I don't think it's some kind of manipulation or whatever. It is literally a business trying to appeal to shareholders and investors and whatnot, saying, look at the cool stuff that we might be able to do in the future. Why wouldn't you do it? When you start up your own business and you go to the bank for a loan because you want the bank to try to help invest or give you like that starting pay to get your business off the ground. You go to get a loan, you got to give them some kind of reason to give you that loan. So you have to kind of explain your business, go through all that rigmarole, and get off the ground that way. Now it's kind of the same thing here where they are trying to appease those shareholders, investors, and whatnot. And so they have to have something to show. They have to have something to show that, hey, we are doing stuff. Look at what cool crap we can make. Is it at all feasible? Not really. I don't think so. It's not something you would see at, 4K resolution, 60 frames per second kind of nonsense. And even though they did say it was, on PS5, it was very, very tailored. It didn't go, it was very confined. It was like in a box. Okay. The whole tech demo stuff, even when they do show up gameplay footage, it is very confined. It is very tightly wound into this neat little ball. And but that's why you don't see them deviate from that. They go down a very specific path, they walk a very specific line, they don't deviate from it to try to throw it off or screw something else up or show something they're not meant to show. It's almost like a film footage. It is just being dragged along with the controller, and all the thing they did in that whole damn thing was just hold forward on the controller. That's all they had to do. It is very much scripted. I guess you could attest it to like something like wrestling. It is very scripted. It is very fake. It's a lie. It looks cool.
intentionally deceptive when they do this or anything similar, although some of them certainly are. I'm making the claim that the process itself is deceptive and almost exclusively creates a scenario of disappointed expectations, nothing else. Let's get to the examples. Obviously, the catalyst for why I'm talking about this today, as per the title, is the Witcher 4 tech demo, which was revealed a couple of days ago. But first, I think we need context on just how often the concept itself gets abused. A little bit of backstory. Way back in the day, this channel officially got started because of a particular video game, Tom Clancy's The Division, which is another one of my examples, but I'll get to that later. Right around that same time, a little before actually, but close enough, right around that same time, another game came out, one of my all time favorites as well, and hyper relevant for today, and that game was Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Witcher 3 Wild Hunt to this day is one of my favorite RPGs. I have Witcher posters in my studio, I have replica Witcher swords that were given to me by a channel sponsor, and I've been a fan of the Witcher universe for about 2 decades, for a multitude of separate reasons. However, if we're talking about the practice of overhyping expectations, all the way back in 2013 and 2014, Witcher 3 is a pretty obvious place to start. The game is amazing. I don't personally care about the fact that this happened as much as other people might, but it's pretty undeniable that the visual quality was downgraded. Things like draw distance, detail, smoke, etc., all of which were markedly different in the final product, led some people to believe that they were misled.
So I think another thing that kind of contributes to this is hardware constraints. Making a game for consoles. While, yes, there are a lot of PCs that can handle these kind of things, consoles cannot. Consoles are a few years behind hardware wise compared to PCs. You're never going to get around that because by the time all these engineers get together and try to build this, optimized thing that can run, a plethora of kind of games and graphic styles, by the time it actually releases, it's already a few years behind. While they do start with what was considered current when they started, by the time they get to the ending point, it's no longer current. It's outdated hardware. So this tech demo from The Witcher 3, which I do remember it, and it obviously the tech demo showed off something really cool, and then the final product was nowhere close. But when you have consoles to compete with and consoles to put your game on, you have to downgrade somewhere. There has to be cutbacks. There has to be some kind of uh, there has to be a setback somewhere. There has to be somewhere where you draw the line and say, okay, we just can't do this on every single platform. So you scale it back. You find that happy medium, or what you would think is the happy medium, and you go from there. So this is a very unrealistic expectation, obviously. And I get what he's saying, that he thinks it's deceiving, or it's deceitful, or it's kind of like a lie or whatever, to show it to people. I personally think that some of these things, there should be disclaimers. Yes, that this is not at all representative of the final product. Da 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 da. Keep your expectations low. Take it with a grain of salt. Whatever you want to call it. Should they do that? Yeah. Do they? No. Why? Because they want to sell games. They want to make money. They want people interested in. They want the hype to build up. They want people to look at it and look forward to it, and get all wrapped up in it. It's no different than your microtransactions. You psychologically manipulate people into spending money.
Led by the studio. CD Projekt Red claimed that the footage was being showcased on a base Xbox One, which was certainly hard to believe at the time and still is today, and continued to deny that any sort of downgrade ever took place until like a week before launch, I think it was. Once again, just to be clear about this, it's one of my favorite games ever, which holds up extremely well even today for a lot of reasons. But the point was that this demo in air quotes, showcased the maximum capabilities of their engine, not necessarily what the game was or would ever be. It's a mild example, to be sure, but that's why.
Again, there's the keywords. It represents what the engine can do, not the hardware that it's being put on.
It's the starting point. Each consecutive example after this sort of raises the bar or rises in severity. Witcher 3 was 2015, but 1 year earlier, 2014, this time from Ubisoft, we had a game called Watch Dogs. In my opinion, Watch Dogs was an interesting concept, obviously, but if you want to talk about graphical downgrades or advertising something because it looks good, not because it's real, Watch Dogs would be a pretty big step up from The Witcher 3. See for yourself right now. I don't think anyone objectively looks at this footage and sees anything other than deception. What they showed versus what would eventually exist feel like two entirely separate games. I don't know if I could even list out all the different aspects that were tremendously downgraded, but the point I'm trying to make is that the concept itself is deceptive. If you make supposed gameplay footage at the peak capability of the engine that you're using, and then try to make a full game to meet those expectations afterwards, you are inexorably setting yourself up for some degree of failure. You might sell more copies because of that, but the most likely outcome is that at least some of your audience feel deceived, because they were deceived. Let's move on to The Division, also Ubisoft. The Division, like Witcher 3, is one of my favorite games of all time. The Dark Zone concept that they used was fantastic. The player versus player dynamics, gearing process, and build potential especially were incredible, and broken at times. But regardless of its flaws, and there were many flaws, at least for me, the game was bottled lightning. It really was. However, if you compare the final product to what they showed at E3, well, once again, we have a spectacular downgrade. Entire gameplay features, map sections, and core aspects of the world were completely different because they were building something to generate hype instead of communicating honestly. What's more, this was one of the bigger examples where they had voice actors pretending to be players, which goes a couple steps further because it wasn't just about showing the peak possibilities of the engine, it was also about making people think it was real gameplay. Like I said before, this is a trend, so
Yes, it is a trend. And again, it is to make money. A lot of your AAA studios are the primary people that do this. because they're all about pushing money, pushing sales, pushing profit margins, that kind of thing. So yes, they are going to try to deceive. They're going to try to obfuscate whatever it is that they're trying to push. So to expect something like that, or to expect like some of these tech demos and trailers that are first released. Another good example is Avowed. Look at what Avowed looked like when they first showed like the very first trailer. It looked like a really good game. And then it comes out, and then people see the actual gameplay, and they're like, "Oh, this is nothing like." Rah, rah, rah. But the trailer that was released as the game was coming out, or right before the game came out, was more representative of the final product. 9 times out of 10, when you see like like a world reveal or world premiere, whatever you want to call it, like the very first trailer for a game, whether it's cinematic or gameplay, whatever, it's still, oh, excuse me, it's not the final product. I would never judge a game off of early trailers unless it's to like judge like story beats or what the actual like vibe or the overall like concept of the game is. That's the only thing I look at. I don't look at the final product. It's just a like a looking glass into what it might be like. So I mean, you should never take these early reveal trailers as you know as like set in stone kind of things.
Let's jump ahead now. 2019. In 2019, from Electronic Arts this time, we get a game called Anthem, which is yet again an even more egregious example if we're talking
Oh
about tech
yeah.
demos being held up as actual gameplay. Anthem was an interesting concept, maybe, but thanks to reporting done by Jason Schreier in the aftermath, we now know that Anthem was a deliberate lie. What they showed didn't really exist and would never truly exist because it wasn't about showcasing what they had, it was about showcasing the most exciting thing they hoped they could sell if and only if they were capable of building it. Once again, entire aspects of the gameplay model shown were illusory, despite having a voice acted gameplay reveal that tried as hard as possible to obfuscate that fact. EA would eventually shut down development post launch, and the game was universally panned by critics because they sold hype, not reality. And this is where the trend officially starts to turn, I guess, toxic. You could argue that maybe it got that reputation after titles like The Division or Watch Dogs, but the idea of being shown gameplay and having that gameplay not actually be gameplay at all really seemed to accelerate after Anthem. Let's go back to CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 was an unmitigated disaster. That's not to say that the game isn't in a tremendously better place now, or that the Phantom Liberty DLC that they offered wasn't a phenomenal piece of content, because it was. But Cyberpunk 2077 at launch was a complete shit show. The massive gameplay reveal that they did simply did not match up with reality. And once again, it was clear that the effort to showcase an over the top, polished extreme had been placed above any desire to be truthful or accurate. Here's an actual quote from the gameplay trailer. "We've greatly enhanced our crowd and community systems to create the most believable city in any open world game to date." End quote. But if you spent 15 seconds on YouTube post launch, you'd immediately realize that even if this game came out 10 years prior, it still wouldn't even have come close to that expectation. Cyberpunk 2077 rightly became an industry meme.
It
The
was
level
really
of
bad at launch. I'm not
dysfunction in
gonna
the
lie.
city was comedic.
I will say that I did play it at launch, and while it did have its own flaws, for the most part, I personally never had any issues with it. I never had some of like the glaring like super bugs or super glitches that people had like made videos of. I never really experienced any of that. I was one of the lucky few, um, and I played through the entirety of it like when at launch. So, and I did go back and play Phantom Liberty when that did come out. There was a massive difference between launch Cyberpunk and Phantom Liberty Cyberpunk. So it was a much better experience after that. Like after they had made all their fixes and everything. Obviously now, it's obvious to see what the vision was beforehand. They just needed time to cook. There's no other way around it. Like they should have delayed that a lot longer. But I also am pretty sure that they were being pressured to release it. And that pressure gives rise to some really shady shit.
For lack of a better word. The idea that this was the most advanced anything was completely asinine. Spawning systems, NPC routines, basic navigation, etc. Practically everything was broken, and while yes, they greatly improved the experience over time, tremendously I might add, to a position where I would now wholeheartedly recommend the game to anyone who might be interested. Today's video is about tech demos, vertical slice marketing, and the idea of selling something you can't even actually make or don't have yet. I want to be clear on something. The trend of using engine footage that doesn't actually represent a real product, or at best represents a fragment of a product that you can't replicate across the rest of the game, isn't just isolated to major publishers. EA, Ubisoft, CD Projekt Red, these are big names with big budgets. But the concept of using something that doesn't really exist, but kind of maybe sort of exists in theory, to sell a full product, yeah, that trend has been fully normalized. The best possible example I can think of would be a game called The Day Before from a small studio called Fantastic, which was a beautifully sculpted gameplay reveal, oddly reminiscent actually of The Division, complete with fake voice acting, brilliant graphics, and all sorts of compelling features.
To be fair, to be fair, this I don't consider this a real example because this was obviously proven to be just some kind of scam to get a bunch of money. Can you really use that as an example?
Features, only to find out that they literally faked all of it. The actual game wasn't even really a complete game. It was officially classified as a scam, and the studio basically ran away afterwards. But once again, the idea of showing something that isn't real, making it look as good as you possibly can, and then trying to maybe get close to those expectations afterward is an industry norm. Personally, I think it's backwards. Tech demos and vertical slices sculpted to achieve maximum results at the peak of the engine capabilities almost guarantees a downward trajectory with under delivery on expectations. If you make the absolute peak possible demonstration at a small scale with over treatment of every possible asset in that smaller confined space, you set the bar with an impossible height, obviously. And yet, that's what these studios are doing, including, so it would seem, unfortunately, The Witcher 4. Witcher 4, which was recently unveiled with a tech demo, not a gameplay showcase, looks to be doing the exact same thing. At least they're accurately stating what it is this time, because it's not in fact gameplay, but that doesn't stop half the video game reaction community from inaccurately referring to it as gameplay,
Eh,
which I have a sneaking
sorry.
suspicion that CD Projekt Red is perfectly fine with. See, you don't make
Sorry about that.
something which is as close to gameplay as possible and then show it in a format where it looks like someone is plausibly physically playing, so that you can accurately inform the customer that none of what they're seeing is real or fully indicative of the final product. You do that when you want them to think this idealistic version of what you haven't even fully made yet is real, so that they pre order. It's just totally backwards. Some of the greatest gaming success stories ever are born when expectations are spontaneously exceeded, or better yet, when there's no expectations at all. Buying something and then experiencing that feeling of, wait a second, this is even better than what I thought it would be, is phenomenal. But it's the precise opposite of what the industry has now cultivated. It is shockingly normal to overpromise and underdeliver. That's like the main format that they have, because they specifically do it on purpose. Genuinely think about it. If I have to paint an entire mural, let's say I'm physically artistic and I get hired to paint like a mural across a big city wall, and I spend 6 months of my time on a little corner, like a 2 by 2 foot section, with crazy detail, perfect color schemes, little bits of texture, everything you can imagine, but nothing else on the wall exists, because I'm going to show that little tiny corner to a bunch of people beforehand and sell tickets that way. If I spend a disproportionate amount of time, money, and effort on a relatively small section of the overall product, pushing it to an unachievable level compared to the rest of the final thing, and then I show it to everyone as if it's indicative of what everything will eventually look like, that is fundamentally deceptive, and yet that's what practically the entire industry does. Witcher 4 sadly appears to be doing the exact same thing. That's not to say it won't potentially be an amazing game, but in a statement to VGC, CD Projekt Red acknowledged that what they're doing is showcasing, quote, the cutting edge technology powering The Witcher 4, but not The Witcher 4 itself, end quote. Except you know that most people watching this think that they're witnessing the actual Witcher 4 game. Video game engines are capable of crazy things. well and truly beyond what the final product from an individual studio ever looks like or could ever look like. The Division, as an example, used to be based on the Snowdrop engine, which can probably do crazy things that none of us have ever seen. It's proprietary, so we don't have like that much information on it. But when you are then forced to make a product that functions under a certain set of guidelines, with PvP and damage and loot and general balancing, suddenly the idea of let's make a character slow walk through a set of pre-scripted events in the most beautiful way possible becomes a lie, because you can't make the rest of the game work like that, and you never could in the first place. It's totally backwards. The video game industry has a problem because they've normalized high initial expectations and lower eventual outputs. They do it for a variety of reasons, namely profit, I would assume, but that doesn't make it okay. Over and over, we've seen developers and publishing companies overhype and underdeliver because they use tech demos and vertical slices to sell the idea of a finished product, knowing full well that they likely cannot make the final product with that standard, but they do it anyway, and I have a horrible sneaking suspicion that the same exact thing is happening right now, today, with The Witcher 4. Yes, this time they're being a little bit more careful with the verbiage, I guess, but they can get away with that because a large number of people who see this content will just default assume that's the game, which, in my opinion, is specifically what they want to have happen. I can't personally make a huge impact on this, but the video game industry should stop, or at the very least, substantially limit their tendency to do this. Otherwise, we'll continue to have downgrades and disappointing launch day conditions for practically.
Well, why would you do that? If you do that, you're not making all that money anymore. Let's stop with the morality and the ethics, okay? They're going to continue to do it because it's what's making them money. It's what gets people hyped for the game. Why wouldn't you do it? If I was a businessman, I'd do it.
All major high profile releases, even for products that otherwise would have been extremely well received. I hope I'm wrong. I hope The Witcher 4 ends up with accurate advertising, but I tend to get annoyed now witnessing these sculpted tech demos and falsified expectations. I don't care what your engine can do with an on rails perfectly crafted little snapshot. I could not give less of a shit what you can sculpt with no legitimate surrounding gameplay systems. It does not matter, it's less than matters, like it's zero, negative value, what the Unreal Engine 5 can theoretically do or look like, because games basically never.
I'm sorry, but that just reminded me of the typical like reaction from some little kid, like, "Ooh, you're so cool." It sounded very childish. I'm not gonna lie.
Never achieve the full capabilities of any engine. So why should we get hyped for something that has no bearing on the actual product whatsoever? At the end of the day, the gaming industry needs to learn that accuracy is more appreciated than hype. Just because it's commonly accepted to do something doesn't make it a good idea, and it certainly doesn't make you a favorite in the consumer industry. But yeah, that's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal, locals and Patreon for monthly memberships, merch, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.
Okay. All right. It was a good video. Obviously, I mean, I don't agree with everything that he says. I get what he's trying to say, and I get what he's, what kind of, narrative, or not really narrative, but like, what his current opinion is. I understand it. I don't agree with everything he says, but it is deceptive, yes. Is it ethical, moral, whatever you want to call it? No. Do I care? No. Because it's not indicative of the final product. Does it look cool? Yeah. Looks really fucking cool. But the problem is you will still continue to have the console releases kind of like hold that technology back. There's nothing you can do to stop that until the day you have consoles that are coming out when, the same time with the same current hardware as PCs. So like when you're, I don't know, your NVIDIA 7080, whatever you want to call it, like, unless that's going to happen, you're never going to have games that are going to look that good. Because while yes, engines can do things, hardware cannot. That's where you have to realize that there is a line, and you're never going to realistically get that. Now, I think the main takeaway from like the Witcher 4 one that was shown the other day the main takeaway from that was that they've made, new technology or found a way in Unreal to make horse muscles move realistically. Cool. Is it going to look like that in the real game? No. Is it still going to look a lot better than The Witcher 3 or what you have in some other games that are out right now? Probably. It's not going to be the super high realistic kind of thing that they showcased. No. But it's still going to look good. The fact that they can do it, it's like taking I don't know, some kind of engineer that says, hey, I can make a super high powered, super fancy looking train and put it on a bullet or, the bullet track and do this, that, and the other. And it can turn and swerve and da 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 da. And then it finally comes out. And while, yes, it can do the turns and swerves, it just doesn't look as pretty. It looks like a hunk of junk. Still going to have it. So that's my ramble for that. So, but yeah, I'll go ahead and link the video. You can like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and just kind of show some support. So, like I said before with the last one, I don't want to leave anybody out or give anybody a reason to try to come at me for anything. So I try to represent them properly. So, but yeah, I guess you guys can just let me know how you feel about these kind of subjects or whatnot. Um, Again, I think it's kind of cool. I personally like what they do with all the showcases and stuff for like tech demos and whatnot. It's really cool shit. As somebody that's played games since I was a child, for the last 15, 20 years or whatever, it's still cool. Like, let, let's be real, it's cool. We like seeing this kind of stuff. It gets people hyped. It does what it's supposed to do. It generates the eyes on it, the publicity, the hype, the pre-orders. But I mean, it is what it is. So